Thank you for tuning in to Meaning Beyond Measure, a look between the staves. I'm your host, Ben Peterson. The purpose of this podcast is to dive deep into music, to share the story behind the sonnet, to explore the conundrums composers faced, and ultimately to discover new meaning in the music we make. In 1824, music was changed forever. At the Theater am Kärtner Tor in Vienna, Ludwig van Beethoven took the stage for the first time in 12 years for the premiere of his Ninth Symphony. The audience was so moved by Beethoven's masterful symphony that they rose to applaud him. But Beethoven continued conducting, completely oblivious to their praise. It wasn't until the contralto soloist turned him around that Beethoven beheld their tumultuous reception. Beethoven was deaf, and the audience knew it, so they applauded louder. They gave Beethoven 5 standing ovations so that he could see their support, even though he couldn't hear it. The importance of Beethoven's Ninth can't be overstated. Since it remains unparalleled in history, one could explore how this piece became the anthem of nations, or how it was played when the Berlin Wall fell, or even how it became a Japanese New Year's tradition. Or perhaps most remarkable of all, how Beethoven composed it when he was almost completely deaf. But since this was the first symphony to include the human voice with brilliant choir and soloists, let's dive into the text to discover how these lines merited the distinction of the first symphonic words. An die Freude, or Ode to Joy, was written by the prolific poet Friedrich Schiller. Schiller was born in 1759 in Marbach. His father was a military doctor, and his mother was Elisabetta Schiller. Young Friedrich had 5 sisters, and he was the family's only son. Now, both of Schiller's parents were Protestants, and they were eager for Schiller to join the clergy. And that was fine by him. Schiller enjoyed reading the Bible and had a wonderful teacher, their village priest, Father Moser. Unfortunately, financial difficulties arose. Well, primarily because the Duke's army refused to pay Schiller's father for 3 years. The family was forced to leave their home, and then they had to part with something far more precious, their son. The Duke Karl Eugen commanded the Schillers to send young Friedrich to his military academy. Schiller's parents refused, but the Duke forced them to sign away their parental rights, essentially naming the Duke as Schiller's new father. Ripped from his home, the 13-year-old Schiller was subjected to mistreatment and abuse at Duke Eugen's military school, where he remained until he was 21. Soon after arriving, Schiller fell ill, and he remained in poor health throughout his life. Schiller witnessed firsthand how the Duke and other aristocrats mistreated their subjects, and Schiller developed an earnest yearning for freedom. Despite his difficult circumstances, Schiller studied the works of Shakespeare, Leibniz, and Lessing. As Schiller honed his literary prowess, he wrote a play titled Die Räuber. In this play, the atrocities of the aristocracy are displayed with biting clarity. A group of robbers form, and in some ways, they're more noble than the actual nobility. Well, the play was an instant success among the people, but it stoked the fires of the Duke's fury. Duke Eugen forbade Schiller from writing any more plays and arrested him. Schiller managed to escape, but he was branded as a deserter. After a couple of years of being homeless and on the run, Schiller found refuge at a friend's house in Leipzig. And, rather than focusing on his dire straits, Schiller was grateful for the safety and support of his friend. It was there, in 1785, that Schiller wrote his poem, Ode to Joy. The poem was 9 stanzas long and conveyed feelings of brotherhood, rescue, gratitude, and remarkably, forgiveness. But before such tranquility could be achieved, Schiller sought to promote the cause of freedom. At that time, America had won its revolution, and the fire of freedom was coursing through Europe. Schiller was disgusted by the French Revolution, however, and their attempts to gain freedom. He thought that the guillotine wasn't as effective a tool as words. So Schiller tried to educate his countrymen on freedom through plays and poetry in a movement known as Sturm und Drang, or Storm and Stress. Schiller lauded the American Revolutions and even wrote a play about it. He also incorporated selections of the Declaration of Independence into his William Tell play. In his later life, Schiller returned to Ode to Joy, and he reworked it a little, but compared to his other works, Schiller thought Ode to Joy was a failure. He wrote to his friend that the poem was detached from reality. Even though it was valuable, it wasn't for the world. It seemed that his Ode to Joy was doomed to fall on deaf ears. Well, that is, until Beethoven gave it voice. Ludwig van Beethoven was born in 1770 in Bonn, Germany. His early life can best be described in a forgotten stanza from Schiller's Ode to Joy. Courage firm in grievous trial, help where innocence doth scream. Oaths which sworn to are eternal, truth to friend and foe the same. Beethoven's father was an alcoholic, and he tried to force Beethoven to become a musical prodigy like Mozart. He beat Beethoven and his two younger brothers. Then, when Beethoven was 16, his mother died. At age 18, he became the breadwinner, supporting his two younger brothers and his alcoholic father. Through these harrowing early experiences, Beethoven developed a deep depression, a mistrust of people, and an anxiety that plagued him his entire life. To make matters worse, Beethoven started going deaf in his 20s. Embarrassed by his growing deafness, Beethoven secluded himself from others. Though he continued composing, the emotional toll threatened to vanquish him. In 1802, Beethoven wrote a suicide note in what's known as his Heiligenstadt Testament. Thankfully, Beethoven found a remedy stronger than his suffering: music. Although he was bombarded by pain beyond his control, he felt burdened by music which he had to compose. He wouldn't succumb to his pain, but instead sanctified his life to this purpose. Beethoven identified Schiller as one of his favorite poets. In a letter to a friend, he remarked, "As for me, I prefer to set Schiller to music. If it is difficult to do, this immortal poet at least deserves it." But Beethoven struggled for years to find the right music for Ode to Joy. Quote, "Schiller's poems are difficult to set to music. The composer must be able to rise far above the poet. Who can do that in the case of Schiller?" For such a text, Beethoven created a completely different setting, elevating Schiller's stanzas into the first symphonic words. The hero's journey is widely acknowledged in many of Beethoven's pieces, and the ninth is no exception. In the first through third movements, the orchestra captivates us and carries us through moments of peace and turmoil, triumph and struggle. Then, in the fourth movement, the orchestra leads us to the theme of joy. After playing the theme, the orchestra begins to descend, as though they're shying away from the joy we've obtained. Then a baritone soloist admonishes them, saying, "Oh friends, not these tones. Instead, let us pleasantly sing together and full of joy. Joy," agrees the choir, "joy." A translation of the lyrics reads thus: "Joy, beautiful spark of gods, daughter of Elysium, we enter drunk with fire, heavenly one, thy sanctuary. Thy magic binds again what custom strictly divided. All people become brothers where thy gentle wing abides. Whoever has succeeded in the great attempt to be a friend's friend, whoever has won a lovely wife, add his to the jubilation. Yes, and also whoever has just one soul to call his own in this world. And he who never managed it should slink weeping from this union. All creatures drink of joy at nature's breast. All the just, all the evil follow her trail of roses. Kisses she gave us and grapevines, a friend proven in death. Lust was given to the worm, and the cherub stands before God. Gladly as his sons fly through the heaven's grand plain, journey, brothers, on your way, joyful like a hero to victory. Be embraced, millions, this kiss to all the world. Brothers, above the starry canopy, there must dwell a loving Father. Are you collapsing millions? Do you sense the Creator world? Seek him above the starry canopy. above stars he must dwell. Now, Beethoven only kept a small portion of Schiller's poem in his symphony, so it's worth a deep examination of what he chose to include. Some scholars suggest that the phrase drunk with fire, it doesn't refer to getting tipsy. Schiller initially wrote of being drunk with joy and with fire, and some scholars have interpreted this as symbolic of partaking of the sacrament. We drink and are cleansed by the Spirit, like a baptism of fire, and being clean, we're open to receive an abundance of joy. The friend proven in death is also symbolic, referring to Christ, who gave his life, who came that we might have joy, and that we might have it more abundantly. For Beethoven, joy and God are inseparably linked. God is not referenced only in pronouns, but also as the Creator, the Heavenly One, and a loving Father. In fact, these references to God appear in the score far more often than each derivative of the word joy. It's as though Beethoven would attest that he is the source of all joy. But Beethoven doesn't show this through repetition alone. Throughout his primarily loud, boisterous forte piece, Beethoven drops the entire choir to a pianissimo once to say, "Seek him above the starry canopy." Then the choir shouts, "Above the stars he must dwell." Then again as a whisper, "Above the stars he must dwell." Just before the end of the score, Beethoven repeats this piano phrase, adding the line, "Above the starry canopy there must dwell a loving Father. A loving Father must dwell." For Beethoven, who never had a loving father, this line feels particularly poignant. Despite his struggles, despite his youth, despite his hearing loss, Beethoven held to the belief that there was a loving Father in the stars, who could grant him and all mankind a joy beyond fathoming. I hope that as you listen to Beethoven's Ninth, that you'll be filled with joy, and perhaps even a joy which passes understanding. May we live in the hope that all mankind will indeed become brothers and sisters, perhaps through words like Schiller's or music like Beethoven's, but certainly through you and your efforts to reach out and impart joy. I'm Ben Peterson. Thank you for discovering with me this meaning beyond measure.